certainly agree with the chairman here with regards to his comments about the advance appropriations within IHS. As you point out, Mr. Chairman, it's working on the veteran side. We see that benefit, the trust responsibility, the obligation that we have to our First Peoples. Seems to me that we ought to be able to advance this. Secretary Washburn, I mentioned in my questions to Natasha that I was going to pose somewhat the same question about funding for our tribal courts. And I've asked you before about BIA's policy about not funding tribes in PL 280 states. We've got our tribal courts in Alaska. They are making tremendous advances and advantages, but with very, very little funding. And again, our tribal court judges, they train alongside our state court judges. Our tribes really need to have annual funding for operation of their courts. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be looking within Interior Appropriations Subcommittee as to how we might be able to facilitate this. But I would urge you to put together some kind of an action plan regarding funding for our tribal courts in Alaska on an annual basis. And if you and I want to sit down and have maybe just a little bit more conversation about this, but it is something that we have got to address. The issues of jurisdiction are very difficult and complicated, but I worry a great deal that we might be able to resolve that, and yet if we haven't done anything to help facilitate the operations and administrations of these tribal courts, we're not going to be nearly as far along as we should. So if you don't have an action plan in your back pocket that you want to present right now, I'm happy to work with you and your folks more on this, but it's something that I really think that we need to get to work on.
Senator Murkowski, thank you for your leadership on this. Justice needs to come to Alaska too, for sure. And again, I think the Indian Law and Order Commission report demonstrated that we've got some issues there. I guess what I would suggest, you did mention that you're the ranking member on Interior Appropriations, and if I were to go back to the office and say, let's fund tribal courts, my people and OMB would say, give me some data, help explain the problem to me. And frankly, it's a little bit in flux right now. We do have it sounds like we've got some fledgling tribal courts. We do have some tribal courts, right, but we've got this fledgling sort of idea about criminal jurisdiction in those tribal courts that Natasha just talked about and you worked with her on, and your bill may help with. And so things are a little bit in flux. Honestly, what would help me, I think, and I'm not really authorized to ask for this, so I'm not asking for it. I'm just giving you drafting service, I guess. You're the ranking member on Interior Appropriations. One thing you could do is ask us for a study and provide a little bit of money to fund that study, because it's quite complicated. 229 Alaska Native villages. How many courts do we need? The tribes in Alaska, one thing they do really well is they work well together. They cooperate on so many things. Would that be a model that we could use? We don't know unless we talk to them. And so it's a huge new initiative, and to address it, one step to addressing it would be to fund a study for this coming fiscal year, and then we go from there. The following year, we see what does this look like? Because if I walked back and said I need $15 million, or to start funding tribal courts in Alaska, they would say, "Where's your data?" And so I'm sort of recommending baby steps, but I think that might be a path.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think it's something that we need to continue to visit on, and I kind of asked Natasha for a little homework on her end too. So I think we've got some work. But I'd like to continue to pursue this with you in greater detail.